Databricks has grown a little bit since you joined 8 years ago. So let's talk about one of the sites that people don't normally think about, right? When companies have grown so much, and that is culture, especially going from a very small startup to a very, very large startup. So, how has culture at Databricks changed from the earlier days until now?
Yeah, I mean, earlier it's been so drastic, in terms of the growth that if you think about our culture when we joined, it was super first principles. Everybody was doing everything. When you were in the field at Databricks, you were borderline. Almost everybody was close to contributing to Spark. We were doing pretty advanced things. Every person in the field, right? And we were more of a very technical force, and there's good things about that. And it was very prescriptive by our salon to do that early days. Actually a competitive advantage for us, right? I think as we've grown, and the culture was always very open, and like Ali's very open with us, and that's definitely continued. He's as open as he possibly can be with us still. I think it's what I've realized a lot about it, and is that when you're an early employer or an earlier employee, and you have been lucky enough to be involved with basically changing yourself every year, is you need to help other people. Like you need to be a part of the culture yourself. So I think the culture's had to change a little bit. It's like it's hard to keep a culture like that growing for good. But there are some things that haven't changed and they won't change. We're very data driven. We're very first principles. And I think I've felt comfortable since my first day raising my hand. I mean, I was in luck. I mean, I knew of Matei because of Spark before I joined Databricks. He's accessible. My first day, my first few weeks at Databricks, I was talking to them about MLflow. Like how are we going to make MLflow a big thing, right? Now we have Ali getting involved in messaging for the company, and he's asking for views from people. And I think that the company is still very collaborative, but I think is there's a lot of pressure that comes for on folks to change, so quickly. I think that that's the thing that I found when I think about challenge of culture is that you can't help but have a little bit of imposter syndrome. You can't help but thinking like, what am I gonna have to do this year to keep up with to compete with myself last year? Like I have to be different every year. And I think that that's a part of our culture that's harder for folks is when you're at this pace, you can't stop. You're always moving, you're always learning, you're always challenging. And I think that there's a lot of like it's been by far the most rewarding place I've ever worked for. The company's made me better. Our leaders have made me better. And I like to think that I'm lucky enough to be able to help make some of our great people better too. So I think the culture is really great. I think it is challenging though. I think it's a very challenging company to you want to stay relevant because it's it's so rewarding to be a part of the ride. So that's the way I feel about it. And it's not really it's not official way, but I can say that there's definitely things that we don't compromise that have been since the day I started to now. And that's like first principles, data decisions, owning what you do, um, being heavily teamwork based. But then the only downside I see is the amount of growth you have to do to keep up. And I think that personally, there's an upside for me, but it's in some cases it could be daunting.
It makes it challenging, right? And honestly, like the pace, I've gotten asked more than a few times by a few folks like, "Hey, do you want to come work here as an SA?" And I said, "Love you guys. I don't think I could keep up with the pace." And I'm a workaholic. Let me tell you that. So I'm a workaholic. I probably work like 12 hours a day, but I tend to be slower pace in how I do things. And I know that a lot of the essays that I know that I admire, they're going at 1,000 miles per hour all the time. And I admire them, and I'm like, that's just not the pace that I personally can work in. So I
Yeah,
totally
I
agree.
get that. I think, and I think that is a lot of our people make that. Like, it's not fair to put it all on Databricks and say that it's just Databricks culture. That's not a lot of the people that we hire, they want to be, and it kind of goes back to they want to keep getting better. They want to
Yeah,
do more. And so they're doing it, they're putting that on themselves, and I'm in that, you
yeah,
can put me squarely in that camp. Like I definitely, I think it's an historic company. And I think that, when I think about the history book of Databricks, I personally I want to be riding that wave as long as I can. And you just like to me, what I've realized though is that I don't think the wave. It doesn't feel like it is ever going to stop. Sometimes, so you have to. And I think a lot of the people that you talk to are special people for Databricks too. So they're pretty special roles that we have. So I think you're getting opinions and things from some of the folks who probably are on the harder working side of the equation too.
yeah. No, no, yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I've I have heard from different folks that, well, if you're on this team, it can be different pace. That different types of businesses you're working with have different types of paces. So, uh,
Yes. But the essays, it's I mean, when you're growing like we're growing, I mean, you saw the public numbers.
yeah,
It is definitely it's definitely again, the word's not it's difficult. It's difficult, but it's rewarding. I think you'll find that a lot of
of
the
course,
people who are
yeah.
working the hardest are the happiest too, especially in the field, because there's a lot of value in the reward side of it.
Oh yeah, and I've seen Databricks has very good tenure numbers from what I've seen around those roles. So I think the folks are definitely these are I think a lot of very smart folks that could probably have their pick as to where to go, and a lot of them choose to stay in Databricks for some time. So you can see that.
Yes, like it's something that the company and the leaders definitely care about is, retaining these employees, especially a lot of the ones you're talking to, that I've seen you talk to are the ones that the company obviously wants to retain.
So I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but so just kind of more clearly touch on this. Looking back, what do you personally miss from the old days?
Yeah, again, if I take it from a personal view, I would, in a meeting, I would actually be helping, like, I'd work with some like retail or company that actually is trying to optimize like store shelf placement with a bunch of models, for example, and they're training this. They have this big model pipeline to train hundreds of models, right? And optimizing that, making it sing, right? And all that, like putting heavy hands on keyboard early days. Like, we always would be intermixing between writing code, being in notebooks, helping customers guide. It was like you switch your hat so much in one day. I think as we've gotten bigger, it's just we have to be a little bit more specialized because of our scale now. So if I think about one thing I miss personally, it's probably being way deeper in the keyboard, right? And now, but at the flip side of that is now in my role, I get to be in rooms with leaders of some of the best companies in the world, and and I've given some to get things right personally. And then if we think about like how the general employee probably feels, it's like it's probably a lot of that. Like if you ask, it's like we used to have to do, when you're 300 employees, you have to wear so many hats. And I think if you asked a lot of the early employees, they're big builders, right? And now, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier in this segment, is you have to reinvent yourself and change yourself. And the flip side of that is in my starting my 8th year, like I talked about earlier, I've never changed myself so much and learned so much in this short a period of time in my entire career. So that's the flip side of it, So I think it's to simplify, it's hands-on keyboard early days. I'd love to like I actually I yearn for that a little bit. But the flip side of it is now that I'm doing things that there was such an acceleration of getting to where some of the things I wanted to do in my career too.
On a lighter note, how does it feel to go from 8 years ago? You're talking to someone about Databricks, and they're probably like, "What the heck is Databricks?" To going to today, where you talk about Databricks, and people already can place you in a category like, "Okay, I know what space you play and how does that transition feel? Like, obviously, you're working with larger customers all the time, but when in your day to day, when you say, "Oh yeah, I work at Databricks," and how does it feel like that difference?
It's kind of insane, this one. This one's insane because there's so many things that are crazy about this. We used to go into rooms in our salon, let's say this a lot. We would whisper AI and kind of scream on the data side or flip one between the other. Now, folks, we don't even have to do that anymore, right? So there's there's the industry part that's not, forget about Databricks for a second. It's like data and AI. That's serious stuff now. Like before, we'd go in and we talk about more advanced analytics, ML and AI. We would kind of be a little bit relegated, right? Like to a, you're like, oh, okay, let's go talk to that team that's small, that's like in
You're
another
you're
building.
you're a you're a specialty thing.
Mhm.
You're not crucial to our data stack.
Yeah, and then so that we evolved there too. So we've done a lot of evolution there, but that was one thing like there. And then I would have to every time I'd go in, I'd have to tell like why Databricks was founded, how we were created, who Databricks is. Now you see Ali on CNBC, like what is it, once a month probably. And that's crazy. But all those things are crazy. But then the other thing that's crazy about this is that when the AI boom happened, folks really would come up to me and ask me questions now that are my friends, family. They started to get the value and understand it. In layman's terms, people who are working in almost any industry could walk up. And then at the same time, people started seeing Databricks on the news. So it's it's went from me having to explain everyone from, prospects to my family and my friends to everyone following Databricks now. And I think that it's pretty amazing and rewarding to be a part of that.
That's awesome, man. John, I know you like coaching folks. I know it's one of your passions. So I know we already talked a little bit about SAs and SEs and that drive, I guess, for excellency. So let's dive a little bit more into that. What makes for a solid SA/SE?
Yeah, yeah, this is something I spend a lot of time. So this goes back to when, we were talking about how Arsalan built the foundation of the field engineering team, right? He built it on a very technical team. Like, for example, when they were hiring me, I was kind of one of the first folks who was kind of technical, knew Spark really well, but I was also somebody who they would consider kind of an advisor role. They started to realize, the mix of that, but the foundation is built heavily on technology. And as we've evolved, again, I'm fortunate enough to mentor. I play a somewhat unique role at Databricks, right? And there are folks that um, I get to mentor and I work with on that. And they look at my role and they value it. They're like, okay, I would like to learn more about that. And when I do spend time with them, I talk about three things in a strategy, and I think that the biggest thing that, everybody at Databricks in the field is technical. And that's a big box of that's like the three pillars, right? Technology is a big box, like it's important. And in a lot of cases, at other companies, that box is lighter than Databricks. We have that box. With most of our folks, we're killing it there, right? Then there's a big part of what we do is relationships. And then the other one is messaging. So, and then tying all that together to operate and get things done for customers, our engineering team, whoever it is strategy. You have to think about a plan and a strategy to do all that. And when I find when I'm fortunate enough to mentor some of our great people, I spend a lot of time understanding those things for them, like where they think they're a 1 to 10 on those three, and are they thinking, how are they doing in their day to day? How are they taking those three things and using them together instead of thinking them separately? Because it's important to be able to use them together to get things done for the company and for their brand and what they're trying to do. So we talk about those boxes, and then we talk about, well, what have you done where you've been able to use two of those boxes to achieve something, maybe all three, and then we go through that, and then we also spend a lot of times, what do you fear? I talk to these folks about what they fear, and if we get to the point where they're actually honest about that, it's a lot easier, given the things that we just talked about, those three boxes strategy and how important strategy is interlinking, right? But it's also really important for us to understand fear, and then how do we cover that off to make their. And then another thing I'll do is go through a brand exercise with them. I'm like, okay, what do you, if you were going to write 3 to 5 sentences about yourself today, what would they be? And then we talk about that. And I said, okay, well, what do you want them to be in 5 years? What? And then when somebody else is representing you in a room, what are the 5 sentences you want them to say about you? And we work on a plan to get there. And I think that has been, that we've been able to find we have great people, but it's actually, for me, that again, I always was knocked historically that I didn't mentor well, and this is something at Databricks that our leaders has helped me cover it off. So it's probably one of the things I'm the most proud of is my time here.
Makes me think of an advice that I heard from a friend of mine because I think we met for dinner last year at Dice and or before Dice, and I said like basically like, hey, I have this going on right now. Like, what best advice do you have for me? And he said, well, start backwards. So he's like, what do you want a few years from now? What does your day look like? And try to work backwards from there so you can try to get there by understanding like, hey, this is where I want to be, and making your plan around all the steps that you need to make to get there. So
Yeah, I had some great advice given to me by when I was leaving Cloudera. I had a there's the COO at the time was Kirk Dunn, and he gave me some amazing advice. I had talked to him about what I wanted to do, who I wanted to be, and he looked at me because he's known me, and he said, don't ask anybody, just start doing it. And that's how I got to that was an aha moment for me. And then I had, when I was going through the interview process with Arsalan to join Databricks, I talked to him about what I wanted to be. And he was one of the first leaders who said to me, let's figure out how you can do it. And he's like, everything between what Kirk said and what Arsalan's done for me, and also all the founders of Databricks and a lot of the leaders, it's been amazing. And I think that's what I want to do for other folks, is what people have done for me.
yeah, it's when I joined Seb recently, that was kind of like the conversation in a way with that I had with Mal, the CEO. It was like, hey, this blank state. I basically went into the call and I said, look, this is what I want to be doing. She's like, okay, do it. And it's like, you are crafting your own journey here. So it is very, very empowering to be able to be in that position.
Yeah, I think, when you admire like what a company's done or a leader and they trust you, it's pretty powerful. Like I think it makes you, it affords you things that you wouldn't normally have in a company. And I think that there's uniqueness of joining a company early and having the relationships with them and growing through that, there's a trust that's built. The other thing is I saw something recently, and it was kind of tied to what I talked to you about brand, is like, if you can almost turn your name into a verb of solution. When someone says your name, it's like, oh, that we need, we need this person on this thing, because and your name kind of becomes almost a verb for that. And I think
Yeah,
that
like
that is
tip of the tongue. Your name becomes tip of the tongue. Like, we need a Josue.
yeah.
We
Yeah,
need
you
what
want
you.
your name to be that. And I think that that's something I actually talk to my kids about. That is like, that's who you want to be. You want to, when people say your name, you want it to be associated with outcomes, solutions, like all these things. And it, that, builds a brand that makes you very impactful to companies.
What do you have to say to folks that are considering switching from pure developer type roles to that SA/SE type roles?
So I think it's a definitely, I made that switch. I started out as an embedded C developer, as an intern at a company, right? That's what I did, and I love developing. I love programming. But I think I love travel and I love building companies. And I think that if you're interested, like I used to love travel. Let me restate. Now I like building companies, but I think it affords you optionality that you wouldn't have before. Like, I think that, I look at some of the people who became leaders of companies. A lot of times they went through the field. Like, they started out an engineer and they went through the field. Some of them moved into leaders of product management. Some of them, I mentioned that Kirk Dunn, he was started as an SE, and he was at the chief operating officer at Cloudera, and now he's fixing companies, I think, for a living in essence. So there's a there's a lot of power that comes through doing this role. You learn, I talked about those three boxes earlier about like technology, relationships, and messaging, and then a strategy. There's things that you learn that are you can apply to so many disciplines, and I think it's a pretty powerful role if you can widen, and then you can help companies be built. You can make customers successful and build companies, and I think that's a pretty great place to be.
No, that's awesome. Thank you again so very much for being here. Well, actually, is there anything else you want to add to any of the topics, and I can throw it in there? Or
No, I appreciate the time talking with you. It's awesome. I love this, and I think that we appreciate all you do for Databricks too, at in the role you play.
thank you. I appreciate it. Glad to play a small part of it. So thank you.